Now that we're here together, is there anything perhaps you would like to ask? Or
I'd be curious about the place of authenticity or being authentic in life and awakenedness, or just how that fits into being what I am.
I think for those who love the truth, it is also a love of one's own authenticity and the authenticity of those around us. People who are simply, honestly, truly being themselves, unmasked. There's something so attracting to those who there's a certain humility to authentic ones. And that smidgen or more of humility is such a beautiful and precious thing that I know often that spiritual folks feel that they have to present themselves in with a kind of mask on, of a happy mask, as if it's just not okay to be feeling sorrow, that somehow we are supposed to, in a way, transcend our humanity. And to me, that kind of spirituality, which in a way is commonplace nowadays, this notion of transcendence of one's humanity, is a kind of madness. For the truth is that as human beings, the human part of our human beingness, as Etienne was so beautifully saying earlier, is so vulnerable. Whereas beingness, awareness, consciousness itself is invincible. That doesn't require us to, in any way, shape, or form, deny our humanity in all the unique ways each one of us is human. You simply feel free to be one's true self, regardless of who or what one takes oneself to be. Something else, brother?
It's only been in the last year or two that I've sort of discovered authenticity. As a child, it was like there was a box of who my parents wanted me to be, and I had no sense of being authentic. It was more like, how should I be versus what am I, and how just being in the world is what I am. And then as an adult, encountered different teachers and different stuff. And it was like you said, it was about being a particular way instead of just being what I authentically am, and letting that loose in life and letting that kind of guide me or heal me or whatever happens. But it was about just a different cloak or a different box that I was trying to be versus just being what I am. And I'm still just integrating the possibility of just being authentically what I am and not needing to be okay or some particular way for the situation or the people I'm around, but just to and it's interesting because when I was a child, I got really bad results with just being authentic. And so then there's an anxiety or a fear that comes up in certain situations about just showing what's going on because in the past it hasn't been so just being in all of that and there's a certain amount of grace and it's quite lovely, but it's certainly not like a completed project of learning how to just be what I am all the time and let people see it, or even just let me experience it without even anybody seeing it.
Beautiful. Hallelujah, brother. I sometimes say that the ring of truth has a certain resonance, and the clang of untruth another. So I imagine that you're very sensitive to especially that clang of untruth when you're not being yourself, the dissonance, the body that's felt within the body so sensitively. And that relieving resonance of truth when we recognize we're simply being our authentic selves.
What's the place that sexuality has in life? Because that's one of the things that I haven't integrated as far as just being authentic with.
What place does sexuality have in life? You're speaking to someone who's been celibate for a long time. But I would say that freely, sexuality is to be enjoyed, that it is a gift to humanity, not simply for procreation, but for enjoyment, intimacy. And everybody has their own sexual the word appetites is coming. I'm not sure it's the word I'm wanting to use. Desires. And I think when sexuality is enacted in a responsible fashion, whatever that might mean, and to give oneself permission to be as at ease with one's own sexuality, whatever those appetites may be, as possible. And if there's something obscuring your own vision of a healthy sexuality for your life, that consider what is possible in the removal of those obscurations. So that's like a 5-minute answer in a topic that one can speak on, converse about, explore for hours upon hours upon hours. But you bring that question of sexuality as in relationship to authenticity. So for you, there may be an authentic sexual expression. Go for that if you feel to.
I would describe it as like there's a gap between authenticity and me engaging with my sexuality, where it's like a bridge that I haven't walked over, or it's like there's just no bridge. I haven't created one yet, but there's a gap. And I think that's where the question came from, or where my observation of that within myself came from.
I'm not sure I got that.
It just seems to me like in my moving into being more authentic, that there's a gap between the authentic me and a connection with my sexuality, where it's like there's a step that I haven't taken, or a bridge that I haven't made, or I need to walk over a bridge, whatever the metaphor is.
No,
there's
I get
like
it now.
gap
Yeah.
between where I'm at and actually claiming or engaging with my authentic sexuality.
So perhaps that I was speaking of it as an obscuration. Perhaps that bridge will be crossed whenever those next steps feel rightly taken. Without putting undue pressure or urgency on yourself.
That fits.
Yeah. So it is accepting where you are and perhaps where you would like to be. So first accept where you are. I mean, we are always works in progress. they say, and it's true, as human beings. We are growing, we are moving towards a kind of walking our talk of that integration. For that is really the true non-duality, or one way of articulating it. So for one who wants freedom in this life, we want that freedom in both an absolute sense and a human sense.
What is the absolute sense?
The absolute sense of freedom is the recognition that we are pure consciousness, beingness, presence, and that we are not limited to these body minds. In fact, we are ultimately not these body minds. We are beings free of all conditioning, free of misidentification, and free to be expressions of vehicles of love and compassion and wisdom and simple kindness. Free of obscurations of any of those.
I heard your words and I have a hard time landing that in me. It's like a one place I understand and in a greater place I don't let it in, or I can't register it.
I'm seeing if there are different words that come. We are not these limited beings with a birth date, a course of a lifetime, and a death date. That we are something far greater than that. And the realization of the truth of that, the truth of found in the realization of that which we truly are, is immensely liberating from the notion of being a separate individual who basically or essentially spends one's life in obedience to the fulfillment of the demanding mind stream that appears. For we are identified who we are as both the mind stream and the story found in that mind stream about who I am, this me, this I we take ourselves to be. We identify with that one. And in that misidentification, we spend a life in servitude to the demands of the mind. So another way of speaking about freedom is freedom from the servitude to that mind, to thought.
Where I couldn't let that in, I think, is accepting that I lost the words. It's like my breathing stopped partway through, and then but it was around the concept of, if I am what I was before I came into this body, and if I am spirit, somehow it's like I can't in my head accept that I am that beautiful, that I was something that existed before I became what I look like now, or what I am now, and what I will be later when my body stops being what it is. There was like a gap where it's like my perception of myself in this body is I'm not that, or I can't be that, I'm not that beautiful, or something like that.
So you're listening through the filters of where you currently are, and I'm really not ultimately in satsang speaking of anything of the past or anything of the future. I'm only speaking of this moment that we human beings speak of as here and now, this eternal moment. And I suggest that it's really incredibly liberating, actually, to forego so much of the attention we put on the past and similarly onto the future, and just come back to this moment that we've never left, this here, this now. For that's really where freedom is found. It's where reality is found. It is already and always. It's not something that is attained. It's recognized as that stillness, that silence. That is at the very essence. And that you are this stillness, this silence. It is another way of speaking of your essential nature, your Buddha nature. You sit with it for a while, brother.
Thank you.